You know, in the history of American crime, some stories are so awful they become the stuff of legend. But what about the ones that, for some reason, kind of get forgotten? Today we're diving into the story of a man who took a friendly nickname and turned it into an absolute tool of terror, pulling off one of the country's deadliest killing sprees with the help of teenagers right under everyone's noses.
And it all came crashing down with this one frantic phone call. A teenage boy, totally hysterical, confessing to murder. "I just killed a man." For the 911 operator on that hot August morning, it must have been a shocking call. But what they didn't know was that this was just the very tip of a horrifying iceberg. That one confession, it was about to expose a secret that had been buried for years.
And that's really the central question hanging over this whole thing, right? How could a killing spree of this scale go completely undetected for 3 solid years? How did one man, with his young accomplices, get away with so much, until it all just fell apart in one single, violent night? Well, let's get into it.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the man at the center of this whole web, Dean Corll. To his neighbors, he was just some local business owner, but behind that facade was a meticulous and unbelievably cruel mastermind. So if you look at Corll's early life, you start to see a pattern of instability. His parents divorced, then they got back together, and then they divorced again. And right in the middle of all that chaos, his family started a candy business, and that business would become disturbingly central to his whole identity. He even got a special discharge from the army just so he could come home and help run it.
And this is how he built his cover. He used the family business to become known as the Candy Man. You know, the friendly guy who was always giving out free sweets. It was a persona he worked hard to create, especially with the local teenage boys. And this totally innocent nickname? It became his most powerful weapon, a perfectly disarming facade.
So with his harmless persona totally locked down, Corll started to put his horrifying plan into action. Between 1970 and 1973, he basically turned the city of Houston into his own personal hunting ground.
29. Just let that number sink in for a second. And that's the minimum number of confirmed victims. Investigators think the real total could easily be over 40. For 3 straight years, boys were just vanishing off the streets of Houston, a lot of them from working-class families whose disappearances were just dismissed as runaway cases. And somehow, nobody was connecting the dot.
Corll's method was just sickeningly systematic and brutal. He and his accomplices would prey on teenage boys, usually from poorer areas, luring them in with promises of a party, a ride, maybe some drugs. But once they got to his house, the absolute horror began. He used a custom-built torture board, handcuffs, rope. The torture would go on for days before he finally murdered them, and then buried their bodies in these remote sites all over Texas.
The media started calling them the Lost Boys. And here's the most chilling part. They weren't random targets. A lot of them were actually friends of his accomplices. Some of them even worked for the candy company. These are boys who had absolutely no reason to fear the Candy Man or the other teenagers who were leading them right to his door. It was just a complete and total betrayal of trust. But here's the thing. Corll couldn't have pulled this off by himself. Not at this scale. The real key to his high victim count was his scary ability to manipulate other people. He groomed 2 local teenagers, turning them into his procurers and, in the end, his partners in murder. So his 2 accomplices were David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley. Brooks was the first one. Corll started grooming him when he was just 12 years old, rewarding him with cash and even a Corvette. Henley, though, that was a different story. He was actually brought to Corll to be the next victim, but Corll saw something in him and decided to recruit him instead. And Henley would get deeply involved in the crimes, but, ironically, he'd also be the one to bring it all to an end.
The deal he offered them was chillingly simple. Corll told them he'd pay them $200, which is like $1,600 today, for every boy they brought to him. And to hide what he was really doing, he fed them this lie, claiming it was for some kind of white slavery ring. It was just enough of a deception to keep them going along with a reality that was so much worse.
Which brings us right back to where we started, that final night. After 3 years of escalating violence, Corll finally made a fatal miscalculation.
It all came to a head when Henley brought 2 friends over to Corll's house, and one of them was a teenage girl. This sent Corll into a violent rage. He was screaming that Henley had ruined everything, and he tied all 3 of them up, threatening to kill them. But then Corll made a fatal mistake. He untied Henley, expecting him to help. As Henley just stood there, completely frozen, the girl, Rhonda, looked right at him and pleaded, "Are you going to do anything about it?" And that was the spark. Henley grabbed Corll's pistol and shot him dead. When the police arrived, it was like the dam just broke. Henley immediately confessed, telling them, "I have to get it off my chest." And what happened next was this gruesome tour across Texas as Henley led investigators to one secret burial site after another, finally revealing the terrifying hidden scope of the Houston mass murders.
So with Corll dead, the focus turned to his accomplices and the massive task of identifying all the victims and trying to deliver some kind of justice.
Both of the accomplices were brought to justice. David Brooks got a life sentence and he ended up dying in prison from COVID-19 back in 2020. Elmer Wayne Henley was sentenced to 6 consecutive 99-year terms. He is still in prison today and has been denied parole every single time he's been up for it.
The legacy of this case, well, it casts a long, dark shadow. The sheer scale of what Corll did was shocking at the time, and it's widely believed that the details of the Houston mass murders directly influenced another killer, John Wayne Gacy. Just a few years later, Gacy would begin his own reign of terror, and he would ultimately surpass Corll's victim count.
But you know, after all the confessions and all the convictions, one piece of this story remains just tragically unresolved. Among all the bodies that were recovered, one boy could never be identified. We know he had brown hair, he was wearing striped swim trunks, and he had a mild case of spina bifida. But for over half a century, he's remained nameless, Houston's John Doe. And his empty space in this story is this haunting final reminder that even when a killer's reign of terror ends, the echoes of their crimes can last forever.